Chairman of Communities, Housing and Environment Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this remote meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? No, silence, so I expect that won't be happening. I ask so that people at the meeting will know this will be happening. My role as chairman will continue, however, the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to Democratic Services Officer Mrs. Banks. This officer will not steer the debate. They will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. Democratic Services Officer Miss Parfitt is also in attendance. Members are reminded that the instant messaging will be visible to those viewing the meeting and must only be used for members to indicate their wish to speak. Thank you. So now we go on to the attendance register. So I ask Mrs. Banks to read out a list of committee members confirming their attendance by answering present, please.
Thank you and good evening. Councillor M. Burton we've received apologies for, and instead we have Councillor Powell. Are you able to confirm you're here, Councillor Powell?
I am indeed, sadly.
Thank you. Councillor Joy?
Present.
Councillor Cadker?
Present.
Councillor Mortimer?
Present.
Councillor Powell?
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Robertson?
Present.
Councillor D. Rose?
Present.
Councillor M. Rose?
Present.
Councillor Young?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Could you now read out the list of officers presenting and which items they will be presenting, please?
Okay, so we've got the Head of Housing and Community Services, John Littlemore, for item 14. The Director of Regeneration and Place, William Cornell, for item 15. Street Scene Operations Manager, John Edwards, for item 15. Waste Manager, Graham Gosden, for item 15. Also joining us is Chris Stannard, partner at Waste Consulting. We have Olivia Parfitt, Democratic Services Officer, present, and myself, Laura Banks, as the clerk.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, agenda item 1, which is apologies, and you've already told us that Councillor Matt Burton has sent his apologies. And then we move on to item 2, substitute members. So Councillor Powell is present to substitute for Councillor Burton, and we've heard that Councillor Powell is here. Item 3, urgent items. We don't have any urgent items this evening. Item 4, notification of visiting members. Councillor Perry's on the line, Councillor, and you wanted to speak about item 15, John.
Oh, I'll reserve my right, but yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, agenda 15. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And I have Councillor Kimmons on the line. Are you here for any particular item?
I may wish to speak on all items.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Just if I forget, just call out Ash, okay?
Councillor Bryce here as well.
I beg your pardon, Councillor Bryce. Yeah, sorry, beg your pardon. You're here to ask your question.
Yeah, and I reserve my right on other items as well, please.
Okay, lovely.
Thank
you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures?
Chairman, if I may, in respect of item 14, I believe I've mentioned in previous meetings that I have a client in the day job, an investment management company whose principals also run a property company whose work I understand to include providing emergency accommodation in the borough. There's obviously not a decision in item 14 on this, but I thought it's sort of sensible to disclose anyway.
No, I remember that, John, from before. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, item 6, disclosures of lobbying. The clerk will now ask members if they've any disclosures of lobbying. They must answer either none or yes and specify the agenda item or items. Over to you, Lara.
Thank you. Councillor Joy?
None.
Councillor Cadker? Councillor Cadker?
None. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Councillor Mortimer?
None.
Councillor Powell?
None.
Councillor Pearl?
None.
Mrs Robertson?
None.
Councillor D Rose?
None.
Councillor M Rose?
Yes, I've been asked by councillors Atkinson and Harper to speak about the committee work programme, item 12.
Thank you. And Councillor Young?
No, none, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Now, item 7, I move that the items be taken in public. If there is no dissent, I assume this is agreed. So it's agreed. Lovely.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, whoever that was. Thank you. Okay, and now we move on to item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February. I won't go through them page by page, but has anybody picked up on anything they'd like changed or have a query with?
Yes, may I speak now, Chair?
Certainly.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr Littlemore for his email to me. As you know, I have very strong feelings about pets policy situation and concerns on the ongoing process of pets policy. Mr Littlemore has told me in an email, and we did discuss it at the last meeting. I have to say that I'm still concerned, but I will still continue to focus on pets policy. So just to say that thank you, Mr Littlemore, and just to say that I carry on focusing on that. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And I think it's quite right. And I saw Mr Littlemore's email as well. And as you know, it's coming back to this committee after it's been around, done the rounds a bit. So we will be looking
been
at
doing the rounds quite a bit, yeah. But you know, I think it's something that the committee have shown a heart for. And you know, I carry on focusing on that with my connection to Mrs D Bonnet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And as you mentioned, the lady there, that just to let everybody know on the committee that the campaign has really taken off. It's everywhere at the moment. So and there's many authorities considering it. It was nice for Maidstone again to be first. So
absolutely, yeah, that's a really good thing for us to be able to show care and consideration and compassion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the minutes, folks? No, so I'll take that as read, and I'll sign those at a later date. Thank you very much. So item 9, there are no petitions this evening. Item 10, there are no questions from members of the public. And then we go to item 11. So I call on Councillor Bryce. If you'd like to ask your question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is, what is the ratio of reports of fly tipping to fines issued and or prosecutions made across the ward of Staplehurst?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. In 2020, there were 62 reported fly tips in the ward, from which 2 fixed penalty notices were issued for the illegal disposal of waste. Do you have a supplementary on this item, please?
I do. It's not a criticism of the officers at all. It's not us that obviously are leaving the waste there. But obviously, we're hardly deterring people with the level of prosecutions, and I know it's very difficult. But what more can be done to support more fines, more prosecutions, because there are several hotspots in particular. I know we've looked at CCTV, but I think the CCTV cameras were actually stolen themselves.
Right, okay. My view really is that quite often fly tips come down to evidence, as you've sort of touched on there. And as we know, it's quite often inspected to find any leads or whatever. We can get as much help from residents if they see anything happening. It's great help. I do know that the information that we collect as a council is passed between the 13 districts as well. And this is through the Kent Resource Partnership. We've got an analyst there, data analyst, and so we can actually share information, especially from the professional fly tipper organisations, if I can put it like that. That happens. We probably work very well with our partners, especially the police as well. And they've been a great help probably over the last couple of years now, where they've actually seized vehicles, they've actually crushed some vehicles at certain stages, and it has been very effective. But to do that, we have to have that evidence to actually prosecute it, and that's the law, unfortunately. And of course, a lot of these things are open to appeal. And also, again, you know, Staplehurst is a typical example, very, very good parish council down there, and eyes and ears. And I think that's, and I think all we can do is keep going on at this and trying to get as much evidence, help, cooperation from everybody to tackle this. Thank you very much, Louise.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Right, over to item 12, committee work programme, which is on page 8. Does anybody have any queries? I'm sorry, I haven't got my IM up properly. Won't be a second. I'm just having a look. Right, I've got Louise. Dan Rose, did you want to speak now, Dan?
Yes, hello, Chairman. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say I'm really pleased that in the next committee meeting we've got so many different things to talk about and discuss. However, it is a bit of a double-edged sword that in our next committee meeting we've got 8 all fairly weighty topics that are coming up at once. I mean, what's happened there? A lot of these things we were waiting for quite a while, actually. And I mean, we look at agendas like today, which are, as you mentioned at the beginning, comparatively light. And I think it will be one of, if not the last meetings before the always fun election break. We're going to be discussing 8 quite meaty things. You know, is there not a way, from a scheduling perspective, at least, that we could spread these out a little bit more so that we can have evening? I mean, the next meeting on the 6th of April is going to be a pretty heavy session to discuss such weighty things. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Chairman.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I can pick out perhaps a few things that are light subjects on there. There's the Heather House update, which we'll be getting, which will be just a general report to let everybody know what's happening. There's your subject, if I could put it to yours, is the GP services. I've just to let you know while we're on the subject, Dan, I've emailed you and asked if you can bullet point for me a few, the items that you'd like discussed, please, because officers are meeting this week, the CCG, so I can try and get some more deeper information for you. Okay. I mean, everything. I'm pleased. I can say this is it's that all these items are coming forward now. And whether they're going to drop off, we had 2 items for this meeting that weren't ready for various reasons. I think we also have in mind that many of our officers are still dealing with the COVID pandemic and been doubling up on other matters. So it's not an excuse, I don't think, but they have had a lot on their plate recently. So. That's the way it is. But I mean, as usual, I'll keep an eye on it and I'll try and make it as smooth as possible. So. Okay,
I understand. I just wanted to point it out, and you know, these are really important things. All these things that we talk about, and we all know we're all human, and what we get like when we have so many different things to discuss in one evening in this setting and stuff. So I just worry that when it is so packed that we don't give everything that's on the work programme the service it deserves. So I think it just would be good to consider for the future.
Yeah. All right, Dan. Thank you very much. Cheers. William, did you want to come in now on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Yes, just in terms of that packed agenda for next month, I think it might be sensible to actually move the Heather House update to the following meeting personally, because we've done that in quite some detail at this committee, and then again at Policy and Resources, and really we have a clear way forward which we're now sort of implementing in accordance with those decisions. So that's one report that I think would benefit from waiting to the next committee, if that were okay with everyone.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that, if they'd like to? I've seen Councillor Joy's in next, but anybody else just on that?
My name down as well, Chair. I think
on Heather House at all. Have you got
sorry.
No?
Mine is Heather House.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead then. Yeah, fine.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I thought exactly the same looking at this, thinking, gosh, all this is coming at once. And what baffles me every time I sit and listen to these reports and you actually said, oh, it's probably going to be a short report. I sit here and then at the meeting, an officer gives a report, and then we have the ward councillors coming in telling us things that none of us know. So my request was going to be, if Heather House were to be on that 6th of April, that we're absolutely sure that any information is shared with everybody so that we've had time to digest what's going on. And I was also going to mention about the provisions for the GPs, which you touched on as well. I'd like to know if there is something particular that we're actually asking for now. I know we need to be updated, but it is on there, and I'm just unsure now where we were actually going. So I'm glad you shared that as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So Councillor Rose, Margaret Rose, did you want to come in now?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Atkinson and Harper have both asked me to talk about the idling policy, which is actually TBC'd. And I see actually that, as Councillor Rose has and you yourself have mentioned, that it's a pretty packed agenda for next month, and I would make a plea for this, considering, I don't want to say too much, but just considering there is going to be elections, and this was a policy that Councillor Atkinson put forward. I don't want to say any more than that, but it would be possibly, could think of being courtesy to Councillor Atkinson if the anti-idling policy was able to be put in at the next meeting for obvious reasons linked to elections. And as I say, that would be a courtesy. Also, thank you very much that I see the local nature reserve is on for next month, which will be a delight as well. So I'm very pleased with that. But just plea for a possibility of anti-idling going next month. Otherwise, it will be after the elections.
Right. So, okay. Okay, can I just go back on that? I don't know if we've got an officer here that can answer that, but I believe, if my memory serves me, I know it's been backwards and forwards a bit, but it was discussed at SPY committee quite recently.
Right. Yeah, shall I come in here, Councillor Mortimer?
Cheers.
Yeah. So my understanding of what everyone wants is it won't go back to SPY, it will just come to this committee.
Right.
Okay. But I'm sorry to say that there's no way this report will be ready for next month. The work simply hasn't been done.
Right. Well, thank you. I as I say, this is not something I've been involved with, but both my colleagues, Councillor Atkinson and Harper, both asked me to put in a plea for it. But I'm sure Councillor Atkinson, as chair of one of the local nature reserves, will be very delighted that it's we've got the local nature reserve coming up in April. So I think I've done my duty by my colleagues now. Thank you very much.
I'll ask the question of everybody then. If I get an indication that we do have a full programme, if I can put it like that, with 6, 7, 8 items coming forward, which I doubt, but we'd like them. Is anybody up for having 2 meetings in March, if we can fit the date in?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm up for that. Yeah.
Anybody against it?
Yes, I'm up for it.
You're up for it, okay. As long as I go, okay. Well, we'll see how the land lays, and then we go from there, and I'll see what's happening. Okay,
thank you very much.
Lovely. Okay, well, there's nothing else on the work programme then. We'll move on.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I didn't indicate. Sorry, Chairman.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Dan.
That's fine. Yeah, sorry. I was just going to come in to say, yeah, I'm happy for Heather House to get the time that it needs. I think if we defer it. Just on a separate note, and I appreciate Councillor Rose's candidness, but I'm not sure how comfortable I am, with jiggling or kind of allowing the work programme to be moved around re-elections. Obviously it would be lovely for ourselves if the Heather House situation was resolved in this from election perspective, but that's not really what the purpose of the committee work programme is. So I think we should be really clear. I know this isn't like a rules-based thing, this is a judgment for all of us, but I think as a committee that tries to work bipartisan to get things done as best we can, we should try and leave out election considerations in the arrangement of the committee work programme. I don't know if anyone else agrees or disagrees with me on that, but
I totally understand what you're saying. I'm not in liberty at the moment, considering I haven't asked Councillor Atkinson, but it's not bipartisan or anything like that. It's more a reason of respect for his work as councillor. So I can't say any more than that, but I hope you can read between the lines on that one, because I didn't ask if I could say that, but because I don't think he's actually announced anything particularly yet. I think Derek understands what I'm talking about.
Saying, in fact, I heard from another member and another authority say something recently, and it was something in the lines of, well, if we can't get it resolved now, what am I going to put on my election leaflets?
I don't think it's that. I think
quite that. I don't think he's not standing for re-election. Let's put it that way.
No, I know. No, we won't go there. We're not talking about that. Yeah.
Right,
It's not the agenda. We're not.
Fair enough.
Right. Thank you. Right. There are no reports to outside bodies this evening, so we go on to item 14, homelessness activity during 2020. Over to John Littlemore, please. John.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm not going to do a long introduction. The report is just for noting, but you'll see from table 1 that over the last year, despite the pandemic that's been affecting us all, the need and demand for the service housing advice and making of homeless applications has not really subdued. So the level of applications that we're receiving has been similar to previous years. Going over to table 2, you will see that the teams have been very successful in being able to prevent homelessness this year, which is really good news. But in spite of that, it looks like the number of duty cases are going to be higher than they have been in the previous 2 years. So that would indicate that people who we are unable to prevent their homelessness are then having to go through the full rigmarole of making the homeless application and being provided with accommodation that way. Table 3 will be of interest to members because it sets out the main, not all, but the main reasons why people apply to us as homeless. And you'll see that significantly those who previously have lost their private rented accommodation come to us has dramatically fallen over the last year, and that is because of the moratorium that's been in place around possession proceedings. So the government's initiative in doing that over the pandemic period has actually proven to be quite successful in terms of preventing homelessness. Unfortunately, that reduction in numbers approaching us for that reason has been taken up by households and families and friends no longer accommodating, and to an extent that's understandable because people who often sofa surf at various addresses have that's people being willing to do that. That's run out, and because of people are concerned about having other households within their own household during the pandemic, so we have seen an increase there. But probably more worrying is the increase in domestic abuse and non-violent relationship breakdown. Again, we've seen significant increase with people coming to us for assistance for those reasons than in previous years. In terms of people being accommodated, Table 4 just sets out the number of people in temporary accommodation, and I think it's a good mark of success to all the various teams that make up the housing service that we've managed to keep the number, despite that increase in presentations to us, very much in line with previous years. So the number of families that we're accommodating at the moment is around 105, but there has been a significant increase, and quite rightly so, around the Rough Sleeper initiative and the winter provision that we've done mainly for single households, and that was in response to A, the pandemic, and B, the cold snaps that we've been experiencing. What I'm pleased to be able to report is that figure 55 was at the end of January. That's dramatically decreased now, so we've got less than half that number still accommodated because we've managed to find pathways to more sustainable housing for those people. And of the remaining 20 odd people we've got under that RSI category, and there's only I think 4 who we've not got an exit strategy for as yet, but we'll work with them and we'll find them something. So once again, that is good news. So thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions, but as I say, the report is for noting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Okay. I've got
Councillor Commence first. Thank you very much, visiting member.
I was going to say I've got nobody in the IM at the moment, so have we got any visiting members? Councillor Commence first, then.
Thank you, John. Just a question for you. Do you think that after the pandemic, that people in private renting, obviously because it's been suppressed up until now, do you think that the numbers will increase and that the homelessness through people losing their properties through sort of rent arrears and stuff and being taken to court, do you think that's going to rise?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Commence. It's a difficult one to put a finger on, to be honest with you. I mean, we are aware there is a backlog within the court for possession proceedings, but similarly, we're also aware that we've done a lot of work with landlords and tenants to ensure that they don't get to that point. So there's been a whole raft of initiatives and grants and various financial assistance that's been available through the council that we've made sure people are getting. So I think we've done pretty well in suppressing the number of people who might be affected by rent arrears. And interestingly, I also think that this moratorium on possession proceedings has made landlords and tenants think probably slightly differently about how they go about their business. So whereas before it was very much thought of as 6 months tenancy and then you move on, I think both parties now, because they've had to look at a longer term, are taking that longer term perspective. And I'm hoping that will mean that we won't see the level of homelessness caused by, or threatened with homelessness caused by, loss of private rented sector in the future. But we are keeping an eye on it, and we will be prepared to assist people if that should happen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, John. And the reason for my question was because we've had to, because obviously you know that I'm on a committee of a co-op, and we've been working with our tenants because a lot of our tenants have actually slid into rent arrears because of either losing their jobs or being furloughed, and not having the same income. So we've taken a different view, and we're working with our tenants as well. So I think it's been good for the business because you're actually talking to your tenants, and I just wouldn't like to see, after like you say, the moratorium, I wouldn't like to see people on the street just because they can actually take people to court and evict them. It is nice that landlords do work with their tenants and try to come to some arrangement. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you. Right, in the IM, I've got Councillor Powell and then Councillor Kadka. Is there any other visiting member? No. Okay, over to you, Eddie.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Littlemore. I mean, obviously, when we come out of this pandemic and all the fallout from it, there's going to be issues with regards to housing all over the country. It's not just going to be here in Maidstone. However, here in Maidstone, we've obviously got to protect our own. So my question is the private accommodation, or should I say the unsold accommodation, like we've had in Pudding Lane, would that still be open to outside London boroughs to come and make offers on that property, or is it something that we as a council could perhaps step in and make offers on that accommodation also? I'm only thinking of obviously our own people here and the people within the borough, and I don't want this council to be in a situation where there's nowhere to house people on a short-term basis if it comes to that. But equally, I'm also aware of the issues that the London boroughs have got anyway, let alone what the fallout's going to be from this current situation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Powell. I mean, it's true to say we have seen an increase in the take-up of some of that apartment type accommodation within the town centre by other local authorities, particularly as part of that winter provision to get everybody in and during the pandemic. So that has happened. And as you may not be aware, as a local housing authority, there is nothing we can do to stop or legally prevent other local authorities from doing that. Interestingly, I did meet with one of the London boroughs today. I had a meeting with them earlier today because the main concern is to ensure that where a borough from outside our area places people into Maidstone, that those people are getting the right level of support and help whilst they're here, and also to work with those other boroughs to ensure that they try and reconnect them back to the placing authority rather than it becoming an additional burden on the host authority like ourselves. If that type of accommodation is good enough quality, then we do negotiate with the landlords and some of the agents that offer that accommodation. And more often than not, that's us arranging for our clients to move into them as private tenants to help them as part of their stepping stone back into sustainable housing within the community, rather than us using it as temporary accommodation, because as you know, we've got our own temporary accommodation that we use. So yes, in that sense, we do try and make sure we make best use of what accommodation is available to us, but it's got to be of the right quality and managed in the right way for us to want to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Councillor Kadka.
Thank you, Chair. My minor observation from table 3 and question to Mr. Littlemore. One of the reasons for the homelessness is the domestic abuse. Just look at the data 2018 and 2019, and then 2019, 2020 is had double, and the projection for 2020 and 2021 is double. So have we got enough data to actually back it up, saying that due to the COVID related or the other spike we have seen, or is there any issues with that?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Kaka. It's an interesting one because on one hand, we do quite a bit of work to promote around the issue of domestic abuse, and we actually encourage people to feel confident enough to come forward to seek assistance and to get help. So sometimes an increase in that number is not necessarily a bad thing, because it does mean that people are coming forward and feeling confident enough to do that. But equally, it is a concern, and there's no doubt that the lockdown period has had an impact on that. And it was actually government changed part of the regulations around lockdown to make it clear that if somebody needed to leave their accommodation because otherwise they would suffer a situation of domestic abuse, that was a good reason to do so. So it has been acknowledged that this is an issue, and we are working with the agencies that provide specialist support. We're working with the police as well to make sure that we're providing as full a wraparound service to people who find themselves in that situation as we possibly can. So yes, there is good information and data sets behind these figures, not just from our own housing service, but from others as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, John. There's nobody else in the IM, but just let you know, I attended a seminar instigated by the Borough Council last week on domestic abuse, and to be honest, it's very worrying and very frightening going forward, and it will be, and it is, and it will be a major concern for quite some time. I'm sure it will. If anybody knows or wants any information to get help for residents or something, I personally have a list of numbers. I'm quite willing to give them out of all the various partners we work with, and what the contact numbers are. And I think early intervention, if you know what I mean, is probably the best medicine on this one. And it was very. We had a story by a particular lady who went through various circumstances, and it was unbelievable, the actual the issues that it raised and the questions it raised. And but if anybody wants anything, I'm pleased to give out any numbers, or you can obviously get them from our own offices. So lovely. Anybody? Yes, Dinesh, I'll share them. No problem. Lovely. Thank you very much. Anybody else then? No. So this item's just for noting, folks. If there's no dissent, that's noted. Yeah.
Noted. Lovely.
Thank you. Okay. Over to the item 15 now then. The re-procurement of the council's waste and recycling service on pages 15 to 40. And it'll be presented by Mr. Cornell, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this report explores various options for the re-procurement of the Council's waste and recycling service, and a number of recommendations are made. It also poses a question as to how we should deliver our street cleansing service too. So that is covered in the report, and I'll come on to that shortly. To remind everyone, there was a scoping report to this committee last June, and that was followed up by a member workshop where we, in both of those sessions, explored those issues in more detail that we're hopefully going to be making decisions upon this evening. By way of just sort of reminding of people where we are today, the current waste and recycling service is contracted out to a company called Biffa. It was an 8-year contract that will end in October 2023. So we're planning early to have our new arrangements in place for this date. Also, this contract is let via the Mid-Kent Waste Partnership, which is a consortium comprising Maidstone, Swale Borough Council and Ashford Borough Council. Obviously, to remind everyone that we're recycling currently through a commingled collection bin, and we are providing our street cleansing through an in-house DLO, so not through a contractor. And within the report, I do apologise, I sort of intertwine the terms DLO, Direct Labour Organisation, and DSO, Direct Services Organisation. They're one and the same. Basically, it's in-house provision like the old days. Okay, so the report really looks at 4 things in a fairly logical order, hopefully. So we need to, first of all, come to a view in terms of our recycling methodology. I've set out what we do now. The alternative, or main alternative, would be a twin-streamed recycling methodology. This would add a further 294,000 of cost to the contract, plus a further 300,000 or so in startup costs for the provision of new bin infrastructure and so on. And the report also sets out that it would introduce various operational risks as well. It's fair to say KCC, Kent County Council, would prefer a twin stream collection methodology, and they can incentivise it, but only to 180,000, and they cannot guarantee this figure either. It's sort of dependent upon recyclate values at the time and so on. I think it's fair to say the feedback from the members when we talked about this at Chi last and at the workshop, that there was a fairly low appetite for change. Members were happy with the service as it's currently delivered in terms of that commingled collection. So the report makes a recommendation for this to remain unchanged, so single stream. Moving on in terms of how we could deliver the waste and recycling service, we could do this in the same way that we're doing now. So that would be, first option, contracted waste collection and in-house street cleansing. The second option would be contracted waste and street cleansing service. The third option would be the in-house direct labour organisation for both items. And fourthly, the possibility of a local authority trading company to operate both services again. So broadly, they're the 4 choices that we're picking from on the menu. I have to point out an error in my report, table 3.2.2. The lines for the DSO and the LATCO have been reversed, so please accept my apologies, and that will probably explain why the text is referring to the LATCO being the cheapest offer, but the table saying it's the DSO. So those lines need to be reversed. So apologies for that, members. So the LATCO is the cheapest option, but not the preferred route. The preferred route is to continue to contract out, and broadly this is for price certainty, quality and discharge of service risks. It's explained in a lot more detail in the report, and I'll take questions on it, but I think we only have to look at the events of this year and the uncertainty that the COVID situation has brought about, and the contractual protections that we've had working with an external contractor to control risk and price inflation and so on. Also, just to point out to members, with a contracted out waste contract and an in-house cleansing service, we can expect our costs in 2023 to rise by around 600,000 regardless. The reason for this is contractor pricing and risk appetite, property inflation, price inflation, but the good news is that this likely rise is allowed for within our medium-term financial strategy, so it's been built in and budgeted for. In terms of the question of, do we continue to work with the Mid-Kent Waste Partnership, so that's Ashford and Swale, the benefits are that it gives critical mass and makes the opportunity more attractive to the contractor. And so broadly, if we went out to tender for just Maidstone on our own, we could expect to pay a slightly higher price. It also gives us a bit of critical mass in the client function and sort of collective bargaining against the contractor, if that's the right term as well. So that's a potential advantage. And I have to point out that there are no alternative partnerships that we could join at the present time. So the recommendation is that we remain within the Mid-Kent Waste Partnership. And finally, returning to street cleansing, this is currently undertaken in-house by our DLO, as I said previously. Analysis shows that there isn't much price differential as to how we do this, but our view sort of within the report is that maintaining the status quo allows us to retain control and adds resilience to all depot services. So for those reasons, broadly, we recommend that we continue with the sort of mixed economy approach and we retain the DLO for street cleansing only. So the recommendations are all set out, and either myself or possibly our advisor, Chris Stannard from Waste Consulting, will be pleased to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Okay, if I take, at the moment I've got Councillor Powell, Councillor Pearl, but I'll take Councillor Perry first as a visiting member.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, William. It's a very comprehensive report. Just reading it, I think the methodology, the current methodology we have adopted, it works very well, and I think certainly feedback from my own ward would say that we want to stay with a status quo, which I think is your option 1 on paragraph 4 of your report. So personally, I think that's a good recommendation. Street cleansing is an interesting one because some parishes, and we were particularly one of them, used to do it ourselves when we had our own equipment. Have you ever considered whether you'd like to, bring the parishes in and do it themselves? Obviously, they would require a bit of compensation, but I'm just wondering whether that's ever been on your radar to consider. The other point I wanted, because it's back on street cleansing, which I think and the rubbish on the streets. I mean, and this is slightly off piece, but I noticed that over the weekend there's been a lot of publicity about this litter cam project that's meant to be coming in on the 1st of April. And it's basically a question to this committee and to yourself, Chairman, as to whether this final decision to go down this road has actually been agreed by this committee, because it seems to be a bit surprising. It's a major idea, and there are issues, but particularly around the enforcement and data protection, maybe, that I would have thought needed to be thoroughly looked into. And I'm a bit surprised that it doesn't appear to be any request for this committee to make a final decision on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Since that was directed directly to me, I'll go first, John, on the litter can business, and perhaps I'll let everybody else go next. The litter can campaign, if I could put it like that, was it's been on the cards for some time, and essentially it does come within our street cleansing budget, so it's not going to cost any money particularly or additional funds, so it didn't need to go anywhere for additional money. It's done under delegated powers to the officers under this, so it's quite above board, if I can put it like that. The main reason that it sort of like suddenly hit us and we were perhaps, like I said, caught out, is that we didn't particularly know it was going to happen so soon, and that is probably because COVID got in the way. And how it happened was Littercam actually did a press release and mentioned Maidstone was would like to go forward to do carry out a pilot, and which is great because we can actually see how it works then and everything like that. So from that point, everybody else jumped on board. All of the national newspapers, the BBC, Meridian, etc., and our local newspapers. So, they all think it's a wonderful scheme. So, and that's the way it happened. We weren't prepared to issue anything out until we had an agreed date. You mentioned April the 1st. Personally, I don't know the actual date when it will be, but we will be doing a full comms press release that will also be backed up with signage, such as where the cameras are, and etc. etc. So you are being watched if you drop litter. So it will be completely public. It will be completely transparent. It's just, we did get myself caught off the hoof. I got a phone call Friday from the Sunday Times. We're doing an article on you on Sunday, Derek. What have you got to say? So, and that's how the ball started rolling so quickly. But and so I hope you're happy with that, John.
Derek, can I just quickly come back? The thing just slightly, it came up, one of my residents has raised it. She basically on Facebook and said, well, what happens if I'm driving and my kid throws an apple core out the window and gets caught on the litter cam? What happens then?
Right, okay. I think for me, the most important thing about this, the whole scheme, is that it's decided by a human being, because once that snapshot is taken, it's a 5-second time delay snapshot, which records the registration number of the vehicle and the actual offence that's being committed. Then that is put to one of our officers to determine whether we prosecute or not. However, it is best for us as a council to go down zero tolerance on litter. So I'm sure when it's up to the discretion of a normal guy that's probably got children himself, he'll probably think, right, okay, it is only an apple, it was a child, or it blew out the car by accident. But if it's deliberately throwing out coffee cups and apples at the same time, we will prosecute. So
okay, yeah, okay. and Red Bull cans as well.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure you agree with me, John. Yeah.
No, okay. No, I understand. Thanks, Derek. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. So that was
Councillor Mortimer, would you like me to just respond to Councillor Perry's question on street cleansing?
Sorry. Yeah.
I have to confess, Councillor Perry, that I don't know the legal position with that nowadays, whether the council can discharge its street cleansing obligations to the parish, but it sounds from what you're saying that that is a possibility. It's something that I'll happily go and research. I don't think it really affects the decision making this evening because, in theory, were it possible, a parish could, in theory, choose to sort of opt out and deliver its own services. It would be a complex thing to sort of unravel and price and all the rest of it. But if that's something that your parish or indeed any other ones wanted to have a look at, I'm sure the team and I could look into it. But it's the good thing is if the recommendations are followed this evening and we retain the DLO, it's pretty straightforward to extricate ourselves from it in part. So hopefully that provides some comfort.
Oh yeah, no, it's that's very useful. Thank you, William. Thank you.
That's where it shows he's got the flexibility in it. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Okay, I've got Councillor Powell first, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you also, Councillor Perry, for raising that question. I got I thought when I was reading it all over the place, I thought Maystone's certainly back on the map after this weekend, and Councillor Mortimer had more newspaper time than most politicians in the middle of COVID. So that was quite interesting as well. But no, I'm.
You forget who you're talking to half the time.
I know. Yeah. But myself, and I think Councillor Powell has mentioned once or twice before, I'm certainly zero tolerance on people that chuck Lucasade bottles and Costa cups out of windows and whatever else. I mean, they're an absolute nightmare, and anything we can do as a council collectively to stop that has got to be applauded. But my question was with regard to item number 3, whether we remain part of the Mid-Kent Partnership alongside Ashford, and it's mainly Ashford and Swell because we're always going to be alongside Kent County Council. What are the actual? I mean, if we were measured against Ashford and Swell, how are we performing? Are we doing particularly well? Is Ashford and Swell likely to bring our figure down because we're always monitoring our performance? And I think I'd probably disagree with the fact that if 3 councils went there together, they would get a better price. Because what I would suggest is that if you was going to take away Maidstone Council, that is a main piece of business for any private contractor. And I'm not looking Biffa at all, because the Biffa collection I have at home is perfect. It's excellent. But I'm just wondering, whether Ashford and Swell are piggybacking on the back of Maidstone as opposed to the other way round.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. In terms of the, whilst we're in a partnership, it's administered as 3 separate contracts in terms of performance. So we monitor performance by borough rather than partnership. So we always have, up-to-date KPIs for Maidstone only, and that's what we work off. I hear what you say about the relative merits of being in a partnership when it comes to does that provide best value? The advice I've been given is that it does, because I asked that question myself. But with these kind of things, it has to be a bit subjective and a bit of feel for what we want to, where we want to be as a council. So I don't think it would be wrong for us to work in isolation, but I am advised that there would be a likely premium for doing so. And it sounds like our advisor Kristanad's got something to add on this, so if I may defer.
Thank you. Yes, happy to chip in. Yeah, as a partnership, I think partly the reason for your current good pricing was when you joined the partnership in 2013. It is attractive to the marketplace when you have a group of 3 together, and the sort of seen increasing number of partnerships come with some economy of scale, and it also gives you sort of a bit of greater bargaining power with KCC, certainly in terms of sort of developing a sort of performance mechanism with them in terms of as a commingled stream, as opposed to the other twin streams we can't see in East Kent and more recently in West Kent. You can certainly go to the market as in lots if you wanted to consider that as separate entities, or as a joint 3. So it's possible to build that process into the procurement process if members so wanted to. But there is, my experience has been to date, is that as a larger body, you gain more interest from the commercial sector. You'll get more bidders interested because it's a lot of value tied up here, and it will generally benefit. That's been my experience so far. In terms of performance generally, Maidstone sits neatly between sort of Ashford, potentially sort of slightly outperforms Maidstone in terms of recycling, and Swales sits below Maidstone. So you sit in the middle. I think there is some value into when the members meet with the different management teams group together in terms of how they are able to sort of share skills and experience and work with Biffa. So I think there are a range of benefits from the partnership working that probably sort of go under a bit of the radar, but yeah, hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. I'm going to chip back in about, I meant to mention something about litter cams, which I think is very important, and I didn't mention it to Councillor Powell, is that there's concern regarding cameras, and we know there's cameras everywhere in the public highway, but when these cameras go up, they will still be covered by the normal protocols of public CCTV. So data sharing and all that, it's still obviously within the rules, and we wouldn't be doing it any other way. So I just thought I had to mention that. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very broad report, but I really just want to focus on the waste collection issue. I can certainly see the rationale on the papers in continuing with the contracting this out via the partnership rather than any of the alternatives. But I do think more needs to be done in making the service sort of more accountable and responsive when things go wrong. And if you indulge me, I might illustrate with a sort of very recent example where the residents in and around Warwick Place told me at the weekend that they were about to enter their 5th week without a proper waste collection. And when I attended yesterday morning, there was certainly sort of considerable volume of waste piled up in multiple bags all across the street, and it was an awful scene, to be honest with you. Now, I cite this example to underline sort of 2 wider points here. The first is that when I asked my residents why they hadn't contacted me earlier, they said, but we've been contacting the council every week. We assumed you knew. And if you think about it, that's not an unreasonable expectation. Obviously, we all get told about things like planning applications, planning enforcement, certain licensing applications on our respective patches, but it would be good if there was some mechanism for alerting members of issues like this with waste collections in their wards. The second point, though, is then the efforts at rectification. I'm sure other members know that whenever we have any of us have a service request for our in-house street cleansing team, we invariably get either a swift action or the street scene manager gives us a swift response with a sort of reasonable date when the work is likely to be done. Over the past couple of days, when I've been chasing for the bins in Warwick Place to be emptied, I could get little more than how the council was hoping the contractors would act soon. And that's obviously not the fault of any individual officer of ours, but it does seem an issue with the service level agreement, I would suggest. As sort of people on this committee know, in another sphere, we've recently extracted contact names and numbers for members from Golding Homes, for example, and maybe we need something like that in respect of whoever our contractors are in the future. So whilst I can support the recommendations on the papers, 4 or 5 weeks without the bins being emptied in some places can't be acceptable. And I would suggest work needs doing on whatever service level agreement we have going forward and ensuring ward members are kept in the picture.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Powell, for your questions. So in terms of Warwick Place, I'll through the waste contract manager, Graham Gosden, will look into that and he'll provide a response in the morning for you. In terms of the broader topic, this is something that you raise around better use of IT to all effects around the contract. This is something that we have already hosted or are about to host a workshop on with some of the staff, Chris, and looking how we can use when we let the contract to make sure that we've got good quality read-only real-time information to the contractor's system, so customers to a much better degree can self-serve in terms of seeing what's happening with their particular rounds and so on. So I think you're absolutely on the money with that request, and it's something that we will be looking at. And I think also the idea of when those complaints come in, I don't think it would be an issue to get notifications onto councillors as well. So I will take that away and see what I can do with that suggestion as well, Councillor Powell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Dan Rose next.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've got a question for William and a question for the Chairman, if that's all right. William, just on the table 322, I'm glad you said that the DSO and the LATCO were switched. So I was really struggling with that until you pointed that out. I take your point completely around it's sometimes better to have a higher cost, but you're certain of its fixed nature, as opposed to a lower cost that may be variable with regards to the comparison between those two. Obviously, the total cost difference is over 300k. So can you give us some examples or some instances where so I'm confusing myself now because they're switched around. Can you give us some examples of where the lower DSO figure through instances that you mentioned could increase to higher than the LATCO figure.
Okay.
My question to the chairman, as we were discussing it earlier on with the litter cams, I understand your point around your certainty that it's above board and everything with regards to deferred powers, but this is a big enough issue that it's generated, national media attention. What is the threshold for something being as a deferred power as opposed to something that we can discuss? I mean, we're discussing this tonight in a kind of ad hoc manner on a somewhat separate item. Should this not have been something that we could discuss earlier than this? Because as Councillor Perry's pointed out, and just from us thinking about it between ourselves over the last couple of days, we've thought of several issues that we feel are enough to give pause to potentially give pause to the scheme. How has this come about? And as I say, what is the threshold for something to be a deferred power as opposed to something that we can discuss and deliberate over?
Right.
Okay.
Who wants to go with the first question?
Chris, if I can, Chris Stannard, I'll answer that one for you.
Cheers.
Pleasure. Yeah, it's relatively a simple explanation. Why the LATCO comes out cheaper than the DSO is the LATCO would kind of when it would take staff in from a private contractor, it would take that staff in under the pension schemes currently operating in the private sector, and those private sector pension schemes are kind of traditionally around about 3% or 4% mark. Your kind of the DSO has the higher cost for your current pension costs in-house, run somewhere around the 18% mark, and that's why the LATCO offers a cheaper cost than the DSO. That's the primary driver. I think one of the concerns about sort of the LATCO issue is also, I think when we talked about it, one of the member sessions, is that pension variance is not necessarily something the members would be particularly comfortable with. It's necessarily offering the lowest pension contribution anyway, and also the fact that there were a lot of risks associated with that LATCO operation that weren't contracting out would effectively resolve. So I think there were sort of concerns about that sort of the LATCO savings wouldn't materialise, and the additional risks associated with the LATCO really wouldn't offer the surety that the council was looking for. Does that answer your question, General? Councillor Rose?
Yep, that's fine. Okay with that, Dan?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Coming back to the litter cam again, I mean, I understand your concerns and what the members are asking me this evening, and I quite recover. However, when I've been out there with the press over the weekend and the last couple of days, it's been really hectic, and I've not heard one negative word. And in fact, I've had residents saying thank you very much, blah blah. They think it's really good. So what I'm saying is that when, as I said before, the company went to the newspapers first to put out a press release, etc., etc. I don't know what the officer delegation is, if I can put it like that, in terms of the Constitution, etc. But if I've got an officer online who can help me out here, how well, that's my only suggestion at the moment, is to actually say, is John about? John Edwards, could you possibly? I'm sure I'm right that it comes under.
Good afternoon. Oh, good evening, everyone. Yes, for me, it is. And if we take the media side away from this was us purchasing a camera. A very sophisticated camera, granted, what is most motion detected. So for us, it was just buying a piece of kit to do a job. Now, there is going to be a media campaign to runs beside it, but that was going to happen anyway. So for me, it was a relatively small sum of buying a new piece of equipment to do our job a little bit better.
And if I may add to that, Councillor Mortimer, I think the safe, green and clean is there in the corporate priorities. That filtered down to this committee when we looked at how we were going to best achieve that, and part of the sort of jigsaw puzzle that we sort of put together was that we're going to create the waste crime team. We trialled that through this committee, and then we reviewed its progress under John Edwards, and we then turned that waste crime team into a permanent fixture, and all the sort of tactics that sort of feature in this latest proposal have all been very much sort of accepted in terms of use of cameras and so on. So my view is that we have a sort of pretty clear governance trail on this. But
lovely. Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Kimmons next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got the advantage of I've heard everybody speak, so I should have been speaking at the beginning, but it doesn't matter.
No.
Picking up on what Councillor Perry said about the parishes taking over the street cleaning, but what happens? I mean, I'm unparished in Heath, so we've got nobody to take it over, and if you come out of the hospital, you've got a couple of takeaways there, and you've also got a takeaway down the end of Hermitage Lane. And if you look at the moment, because Brian and I haven't been able to do litter picks, you will see that on the left-hand side of Hermitage Lane, as you go down towards what's the restaurant? Oh, the McDonald's. That's it. That's the one. You'll see that there's loads and loads of litter on the left-hand side there, and that's just because we haven't been able to go out and litter pick. The next issue that I wanted to say was about the street scene. Now, working till sort of 5, 6 o'clock I don't now, but I used to work till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning in the town, and I used to see the amount of litter that was left by nightclubbers and how well the street cleaners come in, cleaned it, washed all the paths. It was fantastic, and it still is, I would assume. But nobody's been out night clubbing, so it's not been so bad. But you could wade through the rubbish, and you probably know what I mean because you've been out at that time of the morning as well. The other issue is bins. I don't have a view on whether we should change. The only thing I will say, this is my 3rd year as a councillor, and in that 3 years, 50% of my complaints that I get are about the bins, about missed bins, and about the way that the bins are emptied, and that when the bins are emptied, rubbish is left on the floor. So I have an issue with that, and I mean, even myself, I've had the same issues. When we had the snow, we was told that they couldn't pick up the black bins. So if we had excess rubbish, to leave it in bin bags next to the bin, and they would be taken. And I had some pedal bin bags that were white and not black, and they left them bin bags because they weren't the right colour. Now, take from that what you want, but I don't have a view on it. All I'm saying is that since I have been a councillor, 50% of my casework is to do with bins and waste. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think there was a question there, Ash. Was there?
No, it was just an observation rather than a question, you know, because like I said, I didn't have a view on on whether we should stay as we are or change. I just made an observation as to how I see it and how, you know, a 50% of my casework is to do with waste.
Right. Okay. Right, Ash, thank you very much. Cheers. I just dropped out for 30 seconds and I've lost all of my IM. So I am limited to find out who was next. So I think it was Councillor Bryce was next.
It was Bryce, then Margaret, and then Ashley again. But I'm based on mine.
I think Councillor Kimmers was just saying, I think you missed me.
Oh, it was, wasn't it? No, that's all. So it was just Councillor Bryce and then Councillor Margaret Rose. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Louise.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 points. I've actually had very positive experiences under the current collection contract. I think it's one of the things that we do really, really well as a council. And I know John Edwards is often in receipt of my thanks. I know we had a few glitches over the Christmas period, but I think we have to remember we had a huge amount of snow and we were working in a pandemic. So, I mean, I'm sure we'd like to, you know, I'm sure we've already passed all our thanks on to the collection teams who've kept working throughout this difficult long year for us. And with the exception of one particular place, you know, we get very few complaints generally in Staplehurst. So having working in neighbouring Tunbridge Wells, where I know they recently changed their contract and they've had a huge amount of issues in terms of then in rural areas, you know, your refuse collectors get to know your area, they get to know where the bins are, they get to know where all the properties are, seeing how difficult that and how many teething problems they've had in Tunbridge Wells. I would, you know, if you are going to make significant adjustments, it means that there will be new teams working. I would ask, and I'm sure that you do this anyway, but you know, that you speak to the chief exec over at Tunbridge Wells and learn from what happened there. Relation to the camera, I have on the camera technology. I know that you're saying you've just bought a new camera, and I don't, you know, have an issue in terms of using cameras potentially to generate evidence, but I do have concerns about the fact that this is different. Actually, I think. I mean, whilst we've had cameras in position for things like fly tipping, I don't think when we've had people, and I could be wrong, obviously, but you know, if we've had people walking around the town, we haven't been using camera technology to take a photo of them and then contact them later and then say, oh, by the way, you know, we've seen you doing this. And I do worry that, you know, this company are handling data for us. They're handling photographic evidence. If they're capturing something like putting a cigarette butt out, they've obviously got quite, you know, specialised camera equipment to be able to catch that level of detail. And again, I don't think that it's wrong that, you know, people shouldn't be doing it, but I do worry about the fact that people are in their car and they're not necessarily expected to be photographed in that way. And, you know, if you've got children with you as well, are we taking photos of children? We've talked about the fact that they'll use their discretion, but, you know, what guidelines are there? If there are no guidelines that have been agreed by members, then, you know, invariably residents will be coming to us saying, I've got this issue, I've been given this fine. You know, it wasn't me, it was my child. You know, how does the person using their discretion know that, you know, is it just the driver dropping it? If it's a passenger, how do they then, you know, say, well, that person's obviously over 18 or under 18? So those are the sorts of questions that were just coming into my mind. And I just have a slight issue. We've said that the people that we're talking to kind of went to the media without our knowledge. Well, if they're handling all this data for us, then shouldn't we be a bit concerned that they are going and making statements on our behalf without our permission?
Do you want to come back on that, John Edwards?
Yeah, good point, Councillor Bryce. My issue, one of the things we are looking at a mid to late summer to go live with this. the media release over the weekend did catch us on the hop, and we have quite a bit of work to do to make this operational. And the questions you raised there as well, Councillor Bryce, are questions that need to be answered. And there are some of the questions, such as do we deal with this as a legal issue to a civil issue, that changes how we address things. These are all planned works, and everything will be addressed. It's just the media campaign has just brought everything forward a bit, but. There's no, for me, there is no difference to a camera that we put down a country lane, which activates on motion. So when a vehicle passes, this is the same principles. There's a few questions there that we do need to get to and speak to our legal team and get bottomed out. As I say, the program of work we've had to make this operational is there. It won't be rushed because it's something we need to get done correctly and answers those concerns. If your pushers are asking you these questions already, and we have asked ourselves, it will take time to get there.
May I suggest that whilst you don't have to bring it to committee, and you may not, you don't need to, would a member briefing chairman be out of order a bit closer to the time when because we've given you some questions and some thoughts and the kinds of things scenarios that may or may not happen. So would that be useful to have in the future?
Yeah, most definitely. And I wish we'd have done it in the right order, if you know what I mean, for the press release. But most definitely, I'm really happy to have that, certainly.
I think it will be welcome, but I think if we can anticipate these kinds of issues, and then we'll be briefed when inevitably these things get rolled out, and we will be armed and ready to go and can support you with it.
Lovely. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could just add something, just widely. I know Councillor Bryce has raised issues of fly tipping in Staple House, her ward. People's behaviour has changed without a shadow of doubt. Nationwide, littering and fly tipping has increased. We have to work a little bit smarter. If we have to use technology to do so, this is a much better. Our waste crime team is relatively a small team, and by using things such as the litter cam technology and others as well, this will be an ongoing thing. We just have to use technology more because we just simply won't have the luxury of putting an officer at the end of every road.
I think there's so much sympathy and interest in this, but I think it's just in terms of those guidelines and parameters. It's just making sure that we're all clear on what's in place exactly, so that these the pilot is as useful as it can be.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Thank you, John. Councillor Margaret Rose is next, please.
Thank you, Chair. A question to William, and I hope I'm not showing my ignorance here. I know, actually, when I was first elected, this is a couple of years ago now, because Fant can have quite narrow roads, there was difficulty in getting refuse vehicles actually along the roads. I'm just wondering now about the size of vehicles and if they will be able to negotiate narrow roads. So that's something I think, particularly areas like Fan that are quite narrow with cars parked all over the place, that we'd be grateful to know about.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Rose. It's a good question. These kind of questions are what we pose to the contractor through the bidding process. So we give them core information about all our streets, properties, what are the hard to collect areas and so on. And then we, through the competitive dialogue process, look to bottom those issues out as in terms of what service solutions can they provide given the various constraints. So it's not, I don't think it's for us to say how they do it. It's for them to, sort of work through those possible solutions on a sort of open book basis.
Yeah, it was. I remember. I mean, we're going back as I say, quite a way back now. But it was thought that possibly when these new contracts came up, that there would be the possibility of having a vehicle that can go narrow. I mean, not just Fant, but other areas in Maidstone that have difficulties in being able to reach all of the residents, because we did have quite a few. We haven't actually had for quite a while, I don't think, but we did actually have quite a few complaints that refuse wasn't being collected because the lorries couldn't get down to collect it. So I very much hope that that will be something that won't happen in the future.
Yeah, well, as I say, it's a good question. We'll make sure it's reflected in our service specification for which we go out to tender on. And Chris Stannard, who's on the call, is working with us on that, and I'm sure he'll be all over these kind of details. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Margaret. Councillor Powell, please.
It's just an ancillary point. I don't really want to sort of the discussion to keep going off in tangents about litter cam. But just as a reminder, I'm pretty sure that as a committee, we discussed these sorts of things in previous years, and we did